Once your storage is configured, the next step is to set up policies. Policies are the heart of the Commvault environment. Policy-based data management provides simple and scalable management of all of your data. Once you understand Commvault policies, you'll be well on your way to becoming a Commvault expert. When using a disk library with Commvault deduplication, you will first need to configure a global deduplication policy. Then you can set up storage policies where you will define how many copies of data you want and how long you want to keep your data for. Finally, schedule policies are configured to determine when backups will occur and what type of backups they will be.
A global deduplication policy is used to link one or more storage policies to a common disk library and a deduplication database, or DDB. This provides efficient deduplication ratios and greater flexibility. While creating the global policy, the library, media agent, and location of the DDB must be provided. The following demonstration shows you the process to create a global deduplication policy.
Now let's configure a global deduplication policy. In the Commvault browser and storage resources, go to Deduplication Engines. This will list all the global deduplication policies that are configured in the Commvault environment. Right-click, select New Global Deduplication Policy. The first option in the wizard is the name for the policy. This should be a descriptive name, the location of where the storage is, what type of data is being protected. Make sure it makes sense to you, not only when you're looking at it in the Commvault browser, but also when you're viewing your reports. Next step, the disk library. This is where all the deduplicated data will be stored. This library should be configured in a previous step under Storage Resources, and you just select that library from the drop-down box. Next step, the media agent that will write to that library. Now we're going to take a look at partition deduplication. This option, is checkbox here, would enable partition deduplication. This is for very large environments that are protecting hundreds of terabytes of data. In this particular example, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to set up our global policy just with one deduplication database. So click Next here without checking off that option, and then you're going to specify the location of the deduplication database. You could either browse to a location, or you could just type in the path. No matter where you put this deduplication database, it is absolutely essential that that location is high-performance disks. Check with the documentation site at documentation.commvault.com to find out exactly how you should scale your deduplication database location. Once all of these options have been selected, review your settings and click Finish.
A storage policy defines rules to determine how data will be managed. The first rule defines what subclients a storage policy will manage. The second rule defines the library that will be used to store the data. And the third rule defines how long the data is to be kept in storage. But how does the storage policy work? Let's take a look. Within a storage policy, policy copies allow data to be copied to multiple locations. Two example locations are a main data center and a disaster recovery or DR site. There are three types of storage policy copies. A primary copy. This is the target library where the client servers send their data during backup jobs. A secondary synchronous copy, which is used when sending data off-site each day. And a secondary selective copy, which sends data off-site but at specific intervals, such as weekly or monthly. This next demonstration shows you how easy it is to create a storage policy with the Storage Policy Wizard.
Creating storage policies in Commvault software is a straightforward process. In the Commvault browser, expand Policies and go to Storage Policies. Right-click and select New Storage Policy. This will launch the Storage Policy Creation Wizard. The first option here is to select whether or not this is going to be a standard data protection policy or a dedicated CommServe DR storage policy. We're going to go ahead and select standard data protection. The next screen allows us to create a name for the policy. This policy name should be descriptive. For example, what type of data are you backing up? Windows file servers, virtual machines, Exchange databases. Or you may want to choose to use policy names based on retention settings, like a 30-day policy, a 60-day policy. Make sure it makes sense to you. Next, we're going to select the options to enable global deduplication. The global deduplication policy should have already been created. We're going to select yes to have the primary copy of this storage policy attached to that global deduplication policy. The other option we're going to do is enable client-side deduplication. The next screen allows us to select which global deduplication policy will be associated with this primary copy. Two very important options on the next screen. The first option is the number of streams that will be managed by the storage policy. This number defaults to 100, and we strongly recommend that you just leave it at the default setting. The next option is the retention settings. This defaults to 15 days and 2 cycles. Now, this is just an out-of-the-box default. It is strongly encouraged that you discuss what your retention should be set with fellow IT members, with managers, with business owners, the people that own that data. Find out what the real retention should be set to and configure these retention settings appropriately. For example, we want to set retention to 30 days. Go in here, you could set it to 30 days, leave the cycles at 2, that's fine. Also note that any time that you want to change retention, just go to the properties of the copy and you can change the retention later on down the road. Once all your options are set, you can review them here and click Finish. Now that the storage policy and the primary copy are configured, let's go and add a secondary synchronous copy. Right-click on the storage policy, select All Tasks, Create New Copy. Here we don't have a wizard, but we do have some simple options that you can fill out. I know it appears that there are a lot of tabs here, but in actuality, we're only going to focus on 2 tabs to set up the synchronous copy. First thing we will do is provide a name for this policy. Just like you made the primary copy descriptive, you also want to make this copy descriptive as well. For example, DR copy. We are also going to associate this secondary synchronous copy with a global deduplication policy. It's important to note here that a primary copy and a secondary copy in the same storage policy can never be associated with the same global deduplication policy. Think about this logically. My primary copy is backing up data at the main data center. The idea of this synchronous copy is to get the data off-site. So we have a global deduplication policy at the main data center and another global deduplication policy at the DR site. In the drop-down box here, I select the DR global deduplication policy. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the retention settings. The default retention for a secondary copy is 30 days and 4 cycles. Just like the primary copy retention settings, you want to ensure that these retention settings meet your business objectives. That's all there is to it, those 2 tabs. You click OK and you're done. One thing I also want to point out is that when you create a secondary copy, a schedule is automatically generated. You do not have to schedule this. We're going to right-click on that storage policy, select View and Schedules. What you will see here is an automated policy schedule. I can right-click on this and I can select Edit. So let's take a look at this. Here's the schedule set up right here. I can go into that schedule and you'll note that it's set to run daily and it's set to repeat every 30 minutes. So what's going to happen here is every 30 minutes a schedule will pop up in the job controller. It's going to check to see if any data needs to be copied that's in this synchronous copy. If it needs to be copied, it copies it over. If not, the job just terminates and then it'll run again 30 minutes later. That's all there is to it with storage policies. You use the storage policy wizard to create the storage policy and the primary copy, and then you could go add additional copies. In this case, we added a secondary synchronous copy.
Schedule policies are used to bulk schedule data protection jobs. But before we review how to create a schedule policy to back up data, let's take a look at the type of backup jobs that are available. There are several types of backup jobs that can be used to protect data. Typical file system agent jobs include a full backup that protects all data defined in the subclient, an incremental backup which protects all data defined in the subclient that has changed since the last backup, a differential backup which protects all data defined in the subclient that has changed since the last full backup, and a synthetic full, which is a full backup created off of previous backups. This type of backup significantly reduces the load on the client. Now that we reviewed the types of backup jobs, let's take a look at how to create a new schedule policy. To create a schedule policy, expand the Policies entity in the Commvault browser. Right-click Schedule Policies and select New Schedule Policy. Enter the name of the schedule policy and select the type of schedule. The data protection policy is the default. Next, select the agent type for the data protection schedule policy. When data protection is selected as a policy type, the Associations tab is populated with client computer groups and clients. Use the Edit tab to schedule client computer groups, clients, agents, or subclients for data protection jobs. Expand the tree structure to select individual clients and subclients. Add one or more schedules to the schedule policy by clicking the Add button. From the Schedule Pattern tab, you can configure the start time and the recurrence frequency. Selecting the Backup Option tab allows you to choose the type of backup for each start time. Once a schedule is created, it appears in the Task section of the new Schedule Policy window, as well as the list of schedule policies.